Okay, give me just a second here. And, okay, I'm going to send this to the printer real quick. Again, I apologize for doing this on your time.
No, that's okay.
Whoops, and apparently my Wi-Fi is not on. It is now. And back here. And printer. It found it. Thank God.
This would be a great intro, Brenton. Just the
Yeah.
All right, so here's the Wi-Fi, the printer.
Now,
Well, since our last conversation, I am about 3/4 of the way through Safe People.
I thought you were gonna save this for the interview. Now you're just dropping all the good.
I hit record a long time ago, so
I know, but still, I have to edit it.
yeah.
Do we have your permission to use that?
you can use it all. All right, I am ready to go when you are. So,
You guys ready? Welcome back to the Ministry Without Hating It podcast, a ministry of Odyssey Haven coaching and counseling dedicated to the pursuit of answering the question, is it possible to do ministry without hating it? We have a theory that it just might be. I am Chad Garrison. I'm here with Brenton. What's up, Brenton?
Hello.
Today we are also joined again with our friend, Pastor Robby Booth. Hello, Robby.
hey, greetings, everybody.
So, Robby, we recorded an episode with you recently, somewhat recently anyways, that was really great. And almost immediately after we were done, all three of us were like, oh, we should have talked about this, or we could have asked more about this. And so we were going back and forth texting and going, hey, what if we did like an extended cut type shop talk type conversation interview to talk a little bit more about leaders and specifically about relationships. And so that's what we're going to do here on this episode. But Robby, before I start, you mentioned in your last interview, one of your little known facts about you is racing cars, that you race cars.
I do.
And I was so dedicated to the LA freeway bit. I realized this after that I didn't even ask you what it is that you race. So what do you race?
Well, it's a little bit of a piece of junk compared to some other people's race cars, but it's a red Mitsubishi 3000 GT.
Okay.
And it's all track. So it has real sticky tires. It's got a big wild wing on the back. So at speed, it's keeping the rear end down. It's not floating around.
Wow.
And it's all got fire extinguisher system, to extinguish fires inside and fire suppression, and got a breakaway steering wheel and race harness, etc. So
that sounds legitimate to me. I don't know, but I don't know a lot about racing, obviously, but that sounds legit.
Do you have many fires inside?
Never had one, thank God.
Good.
Except for the one coming behind you because you're so fast.
Yeah.
There we go.
Well, it is interesting from driving for a while, and also the rest of the driving crew that we go out with, which are almost all pastors and youth pastors.
Of course.
And there's 5 of us that drive. And what's interesting is when you've driven on a race course for a while, and there's some newbie out there. And anyway, sorry, Siri was interrupting us.
She's interested too.
Yeah, she heard racing and thought it'd be fun. But what's interesting is sometimes a new guy will be out there and he'll be a faster car, but he doesn't have the strategy to pass.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not supposed to bump other cars. But if there's somebody cutting me off in a corner and they're presuming I'm going to hit my brakes, we just give them a little love tap, our fender to theirs, and then it scares them enough to think, okay, not with the old man. So
interesting.
Yeah.
I'll be curious to see how that ties into relational conflict here in just a second.
I was just gonna. Is that a life strategy as well?
It might be. It might be. In my field, we call it systemic. It might be right. Systemic.
Yeah.
Don't mess with the old man. You're going to get the love tap. That's fine.
There's your title.
That's right. Maybe it is.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned in our last time together that a lot of our problems begin with individual problems. And we just briefly touched on it. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that, the barriers and challenges that might cause individuals to experience resistance to change in those areas?
Yeah. So, I see a lot of married couples that are coming in, and some of them are coming in with the recognition that they need to grow individually, but some of them have some marital problems that they just cannot get a handle on, and and sometimes they've gone to counselors. By the way, there's a lot of good counselors out there. By the way, there's some good non-Christian counselors. I like good Christian counselors, but there's also some in both fields that don't know what they're talking about. They'll deal with things dynamically, which what I would mean by that is, let's say the husband's defensive all the time and the wife has to be in control. Now I'm just bringing random issues up. There's thousands of them, but and it's genderless, even though I just assigned those to gender. But you know, there are some type of counselors that then will deal with that and say, oh, you need to be nicer and not use those words because can you tell it sets her off, and ma'am, you need to be a little more trusting. Well, what do you do if they have already tried that? In other words, they know what's right, but they can't do what's right. There's something blocking. And that can be an individual coming in or a married couple, but we're talking about marriage relationships right now. And so and I have people come in, they've given up hope that there'll be change. And they're, I mean, even had somebody come in, Christian leader who said, we've already filed for divorce. We're going to get a divorce. So we don't want to waste your time. We probably need to leave, but we had the respect to come and say goodbye. And I said, well, if you're going to get a divorce anyway, you're going to see one another at your kids' birthday parties and things like that. I said, why don't you stay and go through the process for 2 days to where at least you can get along better when you see one another? And all right, we'll give it a try. Well, that couple ended up, they're happily married today.
Oh, wow.
And thank God they didn't need to get a divorce, because they usually, by the way, carry their problem to the next relationship and the next relationship. And maybe after about 7 divorces and remarriages, they finally understand, maybe I need to grow in something that I'm doing. And some people, because of their defensiveness, never get it. So when they come in, and there is kind of a standard way that I let people talk at first, which would be typical counseling. In other words, tell me what you guys are going through, give me a little history of your life. And what I'm already looking for are belief systems. Belief system can be, um, they don't listen, people don't listen to me, I'm always wrong, I have to be perfect to be accepted. I mean, the list goes on. In fact, I have a checklist of about 5 pages that I let people go through in that. But what they begin to understand as we go through a threefold process is that they begin to understand that what they believe about themselves, what they believe about others, how they keep themselves safe in life, is carried over from their childhood.
Hmm.
The worth that they give to others, sometimes into a type of person, whether it's an ethnic issue, whether it's a gender issue, whether it's an age issue. And what they don't realize is all they're trying to do is keep themselves safe from getting hurt again. And so the key is to help them identify the hidden belief systems. And as they identify those hidden belief systems, then they look at the consequence of those hidden belief systems. And what they begin to realize is, you know what, boy, I'm fighting with my spouse all the time, but reality is maybe it's about them, not about me. Let me give you a quick example, can I?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's say, and I'll call them Jeff and Jane, and all they know when they come in is they love one another and they love the Lord, but they don't get along. They cannot resolve conflict, because we're going to talk about conflicts, I think, in a few minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all they know is they can't resolve conflicts. So I have them give me an example, and Jeff will say, "Well, why I'm sitting at the table and we're just talking and maybe even playing a game with the kids. I see that my glass sitting on the table has been sweating, and so I wipe it up." But she comes over a few minutes later and with a towel and does the same thing and he'll say, she doesn't think I'm good enough. She doesn't think that I did a good enough job. And so she comes and wipes it up. Well, notice the implication. His belief system is he's not good enough. So is now implying that the reason she's coming over and doing it a second time is that he didn't do it good enough and she does it perfectly. Well, then after a while, you get to exploring her belief systems and you find out in her being raised that her mother, that you could never please her, and to ever potentially please her and keep her from being hostile because she had her own hostility issues and blame was she had to constantly clean up after herself and other people, or there would be difficulty to pay. And so and her mother, by the way, she even told me her mother to this day, when she comes over to their house, will almost do like a white glove smack, rubbing her finger along a table or something to see if it's clean enough. So her way of avoiding painful criticism was everything had to be perfect. And it was her job to keep it perfect. Well, when he realized that, he then realized that this isn't about him and him not being good enough. This is about her trying to stay safe because even though her mom's been out of their life for a short while, that way that she had to do life to stay safe was still real. Um, and that didn't heal them. It gave them empathy for one another, and it helped lower the negative implications they were making. We took them through a healing process as we finished the 3 steps. But it's interesting. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13, verse 11, "When I was a child, I spoke, thought, and reasoned as a child. Now that I'm a man, now that I'm a grown up, I put away those childish ways." Well, there are ways that we find ourselves being safe or figuring out my worth or the worth of another or making life work as a child. But in our adult years, it's causing distress on relationships. And so it's that process. It's the difference between individual problem and a couple problem. The couple is having problems because of their individual soul and how it's and what it believes, and often those beliefs are very contrary to what Jesus has to say.
So I have a question to roll into that. This podcast mostly goes out to leaders and people who are in some type of leadership role or wanting to be in leadership roles. And so in that, as we're sharing, we know this information. How do we help individuals recognize that inside of themselves, those things inside of themselves? Or do we just say, hey, you know what? We know a really cool guy named Robby. You should go see him. He'll help you unpack this.
Good.
Of course, I think the two of you are set for helping people like this.
Oh,
But,
Yeah.
I often give people homework before they come and see me. And I recommend, like, let's say one of you were seeing someone that was in distress. Commonly, my homework will include books like Changes That Heal from Henry Cloud or Save People, which I think we mentioned before.
yeah, we did.
Yeah.
As people read through that, they begin to get a concept of hurts, then what they do for safety, and then what the road out of that is. So they begin to get a little bit of a taste for it. It's then learning to listen to people and realize, especially if you're dealing with a couple, maybe it isn't about what she's blaming him for and what he's blaming her for. So that he said, she said. Maybe it's listening past that to try and hear what their belief systems are about themselves and about life. If a person, let's say they're married because they're lonely and they found this really cute person to marry and they're in love with them and they marry them, and yet then they keep distance from them, Well, then you get together and find out they don't trust anybody because of being severely ripped off. Well, eventually we can move past that. You know, we love, 1 John 4:4 says we love because he first loved us. I don't know that an intellectual quoting of scripture is enough to heal that person.
Mm-hmm.
But if I can share that truth, but help them look at the lie, or you can help them look at the lie, and then get them alone with Jesus, and to, in that relationship that they have with the Lord, let him speak to them. Can I go a little further with that, Brenton?
Mm-hmm. Please.
So accidents, terrible accidents happen to people, and I share this with permission, but had a friend that they were on their way home from work one day, and a transient person living on the street, unhoused, that was loaded, stepped out in front of the street on a very dark road, and they hit and killed him. And they were really having problems getting past the grief. And initially, we would think, well, of course they do, because they value life, they value the Lord. They give themselves over into adding to people's lives, not taking away. And so to accidentally take someone's life would be horrible. But I was noticing with this friend that it was a bigger deal than that. They were not moving past it, and having lots of nightmares and things of that nature. So I just sat down with them. We just talking as two friends, and they were sharing their grief. And I said, "What did you think of yourself after you hit that person? In other words, I know you grieved over that person, and I, by the way, when it comes to trauma, and that is a traumatic situation, I let them tell me every detail.
Yeah.
I don't let them skirt over it. So if I actually take them back to that situation. I don't mean in a weird way. I just mean in their memory. What happened? How fast were you driving? What street were you on? What time of day was it on? And then as we're talking, I might even say, and which side of the road did they come from? But after you hit them, what happened then? What did you see? And all the while, again, I'm looking for belief systems. So they told me the story, and again, they still weren't getting past it. And I said, what were your thoughts about yourself? And oh, they cried, and they said, you know what, I didn't know that God could love me. In fact, I wondered if I was even going to go to heaven because I murdered someone.
Mm.
And I said, well, I realized they did see it as that. So I helped them identify just by listening to them. I didn't keep cutting them off every time, but I helped them identify about 5 different issues, which would be God couldn't love me anymore. He's holding this against me for all eternity. I'm disqualified from the ministry that I'm involved in. Um, and I murdered that person. And then we talked a little bit. And I said, do you know biblically there's a difference between murder and killing? Where murder is an intent to take someone's life in a way that's non-protective, whereas killing can be an accidental killing. It can be a soldier going to war protecting his family, his state, his nation, etc. And I mean, in Israel, you look in the Old Testament, you see a lot of people worked as soldiers to protect their country, and it was seen as honorable and seen as godly. Anyway, and so I said, there's a difference between murder and killing, and so which one would this be in the category? And they said, oh, this, when you say that, it's a killing. Okay.
Yeah.
So I then said, listen, I want you to take these 5 things. I want you to get alone with Jesus. And I want you to let him speak into each one of these situations and have him tell you his heart on each one of them. When I got back together with him, he was whole.
Hmm.
Now he's still hurt over, he wasn't speeding even, but he's still hurt and normally grieved over that loss of life. but he was no longer traumatized by it, where it was just unable to get past. Does that help?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's really great, Rob, because it's something that I feel like I've said even to my children even recently of what's the purpose of self-awareness. We know these things about us, and revealing those things, and why God would even reveal those things to us. Is it to beat us up and to put us in our place, or is it to be able to acknowledge it and to speak the truth to lies, like you've said, but also to be able to grow from it and move forward? And I think even you working with with our family and our own trauma that we've had within the last couple of years, and how we walked through, that's exactly, I can look back now and like I'm getting flashbacks of, oh yes, you helped me unearth those things that I didn't even know were there, but that we were affecting the way that I interacted, and even relationally, how that would spill into the family and marriage, that kind of thing. It's really, really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important to get past stuff, and especially traumatic stuff. And it's often the implications, the beliefs.
Yeah,
Belief is something that we live by. It's an activity, and to be able to get past those beliefs.
that's good. That's really good. I want to, and we're going to tie these two together here in just a second. But because one of the things we talked about in the follow up kind of conversation was that of resolving conflict. In fact, in the 10 steps you gave us towards relational intentionality in the last interview, that was the very last one. I don't know if you remember. I'm sure you do. It's just your top 10. But that was the last thing. It said resolve conflict, and specifically in a healthy manner is what you had mentioned. And so let's unpack that, if you wouldn't mind, for just a minute. When you say resolving conflict in a healthy manner, what does that mean?
Well, some people might see resolving conflict as ending a conversation and moving past it. The problem with that is a person can accumulate offense in a relationship. And if there's not understanding had in that relationship, a person can begin to disconnect from that other person. Now, this can be a disconnect in a youth group. It can be a disconnect in a marriage. It can be disconnect in a relationship at church, a friendship where there's offense. Um, and, some people would say, oh, you want to hear I'm sorry? Well, I'm sorry. But what they're really saying is shut up and get past it. And so there's certainly a number of unhealthy ways of resolving. Let me go a little further with that. Do you mind?
Absolutely.
You know, for me, I mean, most of us know how to get a person to shut up on something. Even if it's
Do
even
we?
if, even if it's us.
Just start talking politics.
There you go.
Or
There
that's
you
the
go.
opposite effect, maybe.
Yeah.
Sorry to derail you. How do you get a person
Yeah,
Yeah.
how do you, to stop
that was
speaking, Brenton?
that was funny right there.
No, that was good. That's
Yeah,
good.
Yeah.
but there's a lot of unhealthy ways. Brenton brought up yet another one, which I would call changing the subject.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I suppose I could try and resolve things by blaming them. I suppose I could resolve that conflict by trying to convince them it was no big deal and they shouldn't have been offended.
Yeah. Yeah.
I suppose that I could, try resolving it by rationalizing that what I really meant was something good. But that person's going to feel nothing but fog. I mean, people can tell.
Yeah.
People are smarter than sometimes what they let on to be.
So then, kind of drawing back to that previous thought of the individual change, and specifically when it comes to resolving conflict in a healthy manner, regardless of relationship. We can talk, familial marriage if you'd like, but then you also expanded it just now to ministry, which is great as well. What are some things then that people really need to maybe, keep, I would say, keep at the forefront, because there's also what you don't know, but at the same time, let's say what you do know, what should you keep in mind as you walk into these relational conflicts and resolving these things in what you'd say is a healthy manner?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about um, things that would help resolve a relationship. And some of them will sound pretty basic, which they are, but they need to become more common in our life. Because stay around me long enough, I will offend you. And if I'm around you long enough, I'll be offended. But will we resolve it
Hmm.
and gain a friend by learning to talk in a way that lets you know that I really value you? And even though we had some little bump in the road, that we want to resolve it. And, Chad and Brenton, marriage is like that. Um, I am, I've been married almost 46 years in November then. And I've offended my wife hundreds of times, and she's offended me much less.
Well said. Well said.
Is that safe or what?
That's right.
Yeah, typically the
That was
case.
I
good.
never know where this is going.
That's good.
But so the need is, if we don't want to keep just cutting people off, which by the way, can include church. It can include a church council meeting, and it can include, a youth council. If I want there to be a gaining of depth of relationship and number of relationships and influence, I need to be a resolver. If I want to just keep running from the stuff, I'm gonna cause other people to have unresolved stuff towards me, and maybe me towards them. So you want me to cover a few of them?
Absolutely. Cover as many
Yeah.
as you'd
So
like.
I was thinking, first of all, we need to gain their permission in having a talk time on whatever it is, to talk about whatever the it is.
Mm-hmm.
And now in marriage, I cannot tell you how many people are married to a person that one of them wants to talk about it now, and the other person never wants to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, that's more common than you realize. And sometimes it's common because it's just scary to people. The person that has to talk about it right now is scared that if they let the resolve sit around for 20 minutes, that person's going to leave them. They're fearful of abandonment and aloneness and rejection. The person that never wants to talk about it is probably deep inside pretty convinced that if they do talk about it, it's not going to end well. So if you want to start on a positive note, gain their permission to talk about it. And whether you're the person that never wants to talk about it or always wants to talk about it, then get their permission and at a good time and talk about it. And in fact, let's make that another point, and that is select a good time. Some of you guys and gals listening to this have a very full schedule. You got a lot of time restraints, got a lot of distractions. Maybe you got three little kids running around, and yet you're just needing to talk about something with your spouse to,
Mm-hmm.
and but get rid of the interruptions you can get rid of. Turn the TV off, get off your cell phone. Um, you know, don't take incoming calls while you're talking about something sensitive. Let that person know that they are just really stinking important to you. And so, like if you have kids, wait till the kids go to bed to have that conversation if they're going to interrupt. Or if you've taught your kids to not interrupt dad and mom, go ahead and have the conversation. But you're just trying to select a time which is a good time that has the least amount of distractions, the least amount of tensions. Maybe when your spouse just got home from work isn't the best time. Maybe they have to go to the bathroom or something, or maybe they're hangry and they need to eat. Well, put them in a good mood, feed them a cookie, whatever.
Well, if I can pause you for a second, because maybe asking for a friend. What if you're one of those people that's kind of somewhere in between? Once again, asking for a friend, and like you want to have the conversation, but maybe not right away because you need to just take a step back and go, like that's okay too, right? If we're still picking a good time later, I'm asking for a friend. Totally.
Yeah. And so for you to be able to tell your friend,
Yeah, I'll let him know. I mean, him.
yeah.
I mean, I didn't You know what I mean? Keep going.
So what I recommend is if that person needs to talk about it right then, and your friend needs some calm down time, um, that other person needs to learn to give them calm down time. Now, how one can structure that and let that person know it's going to be talked about is not say, we'll talk about it sometime soon, but instead say, listen, let's get the kids to bed. Let's, be done with your TV program that you're addicted to. I'm kidding, and let's sit down over a cup of tea and enjoy one another and talk through this and find some solution.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
Yeah.
it's trying to determine, and now, by the way, I remember a time when I was just so tired and I was really cranky and I wanted to blame somebody. And I actually felt like the Lord Himself said, just go to bed, Robbie. Don't blame anybody. Keep your mouth shut and go to bed. And I woke up feeling absolutely fine the next day because I was just tired and cranky. But it wasn't something that needed resolving. The resolve was I needed sleep.
Mm.
But,
Okay.
but when something needs to be talked about, respect that that other person needs to talk about it,
Hmm.
but it doesn't have to be talked about that minute. You can find a good time, but reassure that person that you mean it when you define that time, whether it's in, give me a half hour, I need to take a shower first, or, whatever, even if that's your excuse for calming down.
Yeah. Well, that's really good. And I'll tell my friend. It's me, by the way. That's fine. But well, and I think the thing that I have, because on the flip side of that, it's really interesting. I also, because of the relational value I put on, the emphasis I put on relationships, especially close ones, it does bother me when it is unresolved. So I don't let that. That's not usually a very long period. It's something that
Right.
I'm going to come back around to. But knowing that, yeah, sometimes I do need that space to be able to process for a minute and say we
Yeah.
will come back to this.
Uh-huh. Yeah, with a distinct time that's
Right.
then
Mhm.
honored,
That's
where
good.
you set a pattern of that.
That's
Yeah.
good. That's good.
Let me go a little further, and the I think it's important, especially if people, because most of us have a little bit of insecurity or a lot of insecurity, and sometimes it can't be seen, and sometimes our other person, whether it's our spouse or somebody we're working a problem out at church or whatever, we're we're presuming that they don't deal with insecurity, and that can really be a problem. So and again, we're talking about maybe you're the most secure person in the earth. It's still important to affirm the individual. Let them know how important they are to you, and 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 the value that you have of your relationship with them.
Mm.
So, Chad, let's say you and I had something to work out. I'd tell you, and by the way, I think the world of you anyway.
Oh,
But I'd be telling you, Chad,
yeah.
you're the cream of the crop to me. But I highly value my friendship with you. I have something to talk about with you, and I just want you to know there's not going to be any bite in it. Because I'm just trying to resolve something and I'm asking you to help me. I'm not like the God's given expert on it. So I might say wrong things, maybe you will too, but help me get past this. Help me resolve this issue.
It's good.
So by that I've
Mhm.
affirmed you. And then in there, make your goals clear, where that person would know. And let's say it's again me and you, Chad, that I would say, Chad, I want you to know by the end of this conversation of whatever we need to talk about, I want you to know that I am safe for you to be around. I'm not going to be biting at you and accusing you, and also I want us to have a better friendship by the end of our relationship. Or if we're talking about husbands and wives, where we assure our spouse, listen, I just want to love you more, and I want you to know that that I do love you, and that we can safely talk through things, and we're going to prove it by the way we talk. You know,
Mhm.
Brenton, were you about to say something?
Oh, I was just gonna mention that one of the things my wife and I do is we have a standing Sunday night date that we play old people cribbage. And
That's awesome.
Do you have croquet as well? Do you
yeah,
bat the balls around?
That's in the garage. We put that up a long time ago.
I'm sorry.
But we have the standing date where we play cribbage, and it's more mindless at this point. And the whole point of it is to connect with one another and have conversation. And sometimes there's nothing that needs talked about that's pressing. We're just connecting with each other. And other times that there's heavier issues or there's calendar things that we need to just get on the same page. But it's every Sunday evening, we put the kids to bed and we spend an hour to 2 hours just talking with each other. And that has been very helpful for us, just to have those conversations that we know they're set every week. They're coming.
That is so
and so
good
we can
and so
anticipate them.
practical.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
so good and so practical. Let me note something dynamically about what you just said, and that is sometimes there are people that only see having a meaningful conversation as being problem centered.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't want to train your spouse or train your friend if you're saying, hey, let's get together and talk, that it's always going to be something that is heavy and
Yep.
and and that has to be worked out with them. It's nice
Yeah.
to get together with our spouse and have meaningful conversations that have nothing to do with problems between us.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, and that's actually, I mean, Brent, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's also something, having gone through some of these intensives with Robby, that, helped us implement years ago, of being able to be intentional, even if it's just 15 minutes in the end of each day or something like that, where we're just having that, almost heart check, but also even if it's just, hey, what's going on? How you doing? That kind of, how's the day? Where you at? That type of stuff. It's almost preemptive when it comes to some of these other, being able to walk through the conflict resolution. That's good.
Really does.
Yeah.
So, so when you're making your goals clear, and of course even as you're approaching that conversation to resolve something with that person, you want to be checking your motives a little bit. In other words, what am I really after?
Oh yeah.
Do I want to punish them for how they were, or am I trying to resolve something? That kind of thing. Anyway, let me get on with another couple aspects of good
Sure.
resolve. Listening. Um, I I would almost cliche-ish say God gave us two ears and one mouth. Maybe we ought to live accordingly. Uh, but listening is, for most, maybe even, it's a goal, it's the destination, it's the solution. You listen to hear, to understand them. Most people that escalate in their trying to resolve something where things are starting to get a little bit tenser, it's they could reduce the escalation by merely stopping and deciding, you know what, I'm going to listen first. I'm not going to cut them off. I'm going to listen to hear them. I want to understand them. And then, they'll respect you, and then you being able to share yours with them, but don't make their time short, just like you hope they don't make your time short. You listen. So you're asking a question to truly try and understand. You're not interrogating them. You're genuinely asking questions that are not putting them on the spot.
Yeah. And not listening to respond either. That's the man. It's
In
good.
fact, if you're listening to respond, you're usually not able to hear them real well.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's good.
And then when you speak, boy, we just can't take words back. They can't be ran under the bridge again. Water under the bridge is what I'm kind of thinking of. So we speak in a way that adds life. Proverbs says death and life are in the power of the tongue. Um, I know how to use my words to throw in a grenade in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But boy, you can't take that grenade back out of the conversation once it's been lobbed in. So just speak in a way that you might even be thinking while you're talking, how would it be them listening to me in how I'm talking to them? Am I a am I a life-giving person in the way that I'm talking to them, or am I just kind of throwing up all over them? And there's going to be some cleanup that's going to be needed. And in that speaking, adding life, don't add multiple issues in there. You
Mm.
know,
Yeah.
uh, I call it ping pong. Where you'd bring up an issue, and I might half address it and then bring up another issue. Well, I have this against you. Okay, let's say that happens. How about slowing the conversation down and just saying, listen, you brought up something that we need to talk about, but let's talk about this one issue first. And I promise you we'll talk about that second. Or if you want to talk about yours first, let's talk about yours first. But we're going to come back and talk about the one that brought us to the table. I do recommend not to load things with many conversations. I want to give an example, and it's probably a little bit silly, but most of us know what a Pez dispenser is. You
Mm-hmm.
got Mickey Mouse on the top, and you pull his head back, and he's got one piece of candy showing.
Delicious.
Yeah, and so you pull that obnoxious Pez off and you eat the candy,
Mm-hmm.
not knowing how many more are there. Well, I have never, Chad and Brenton, I have never had the Lord dump on me like 20 different issues. When he's working with me, I don't want to call him the God of Pez, but he brings up one issue and
Yeah.
or maybe two, because why? He doesn't want me to hide my face from him.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't want me to feel so overloaded or overwhelmed that I can't deal with any of it. But he acts to me like it's the only thing we have to deal with, even though I figured out after all the years I've been serving him that there's a whole bunch of issues I have.
Yeah.
It's the same between us in a relationship with somebody else. We can deal with one or two, but maritally, if you start dumping on your spouse, seven, eight, nine, 10 different things, they're not even gonna they're gonna be exasperated by it, not even know that they can deal with any of them. So how about dealing with
Mhm.
one
Yeah.
or dealing with
Yeah.
two and finding solution?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
It's good.
you know, yeah. Let me go a little further. How about that?
Yeah.
Seeking to understand where they're coming from, um, and giving them time to share regarding that issue. So it's learning to not interrupt. It's letting them finish their thoughts. It's trying to not be in a hurry. It's seeking to understand. It's working on palatable, non-escalating communication. Trying to capture their heart in all of it, and learning to let them speak without you and me being defensive. But having clarity. Um, you know, Being flexible to try and find a solution. Where I need to give a little bit, they need to give a little bit. In that. If it's somebody at church that because sometimes we hate ministry because we've got this accumulated group of people that we haven't resolved with, and sometimes I need to learn to tell them yes on something, even though I have a no with it, but yes might be the qualifiers of it a later time. For whatever their good idea might be. It's staying on track when you're talking. Um, if they bring up a digressive issue, it's okay to discuss that, but loop it back around and continue to go until you've been on track to find a solution.
Mm-hmm.
We already talked about watching the manner in which you speak, but also then, sometimes in the middle of while you're trying to resolve something with somebody, they'll bring up something and you'll think, dude, I offended them.
Mm.
I need to own my stuff. And, it'll gain respect and some relational equity if I realize, hey, you know what? I did talk in that way, or I did make that smart remark, didn't I? And I was being sarcastic and meaning to be funny, but, I'm sorry because I can clearly see how I offended you by that obnoxious comment I made. By the way, you can tell from all that I get in a lot of in the past I've gotten in a lot of trouble from stupid things I'd say.
So this is all hard-earned wisdom, is what you're saying.
Exactly. It's been earned.
That's that's you know what though, that's sometimes that's the best teacher and it's the best wisdom to have, and thankfully we can earn it and learn it from you, having gone before us.
Yeah, thank you, Chad.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Do you have just a little bit more time just for one more question?
Oh, I'd love it.
Just a real quick, and I think we can maybe even end with this. Um, Almost a little bit on the same vein as relational conflict and resolving that, but maybe in a different vein, because as most ministry leaders especially often find themselves in a space, you can find yourselves really in a position of mediating conflict between two individuals, two parties, or whatever. So, just maybe what are some thoughts or best practices maybe that you would pass along to those who would find themselves in the space of, and not necessarily counseling, because that's a whole different thing, but at least trying to mediate and bring resolution to a conflict.
When I go into a meeting with a mediator, could be a couple leaders, could be a husband and wife, it could be between a parent and a child. When I go in to mediate, there's a couple ground rules that I establish right up front. And I'll go through a couple that might be some of the more common ones. But I want first of all, I want them to all agree to a goal that they want to resolve something. And if I see them doing things then that just don't resolve, they only inflame, they're maybe even kind of getting back at or whatever, I'll call them on it because they agreed initially when at the upfront rules of mediation, that they agreed that they were there to resolve. And I might say to them, I don't think that, let's stop just a minute. You know, does that resolve anything? And most people realize, whoops, I was really coming off in a way that was obnoxious. Another thing that I do is I don't let people cut one another off. And I'll even tell them, I'll give you time to speak. And both of you will have time to speak into this. And, but don't cut one another off. So if in the middle of it, especially if they're family, and family can be, a brother and a sister, or two brothers, or a mom and, a child or something, or a husband and wife, family will often revert back to their family of origin and the way they do things. So even in the middle of it, and I'll stop them. I'll say, "Hang on, I'm out for you guys." I said, "I can tell this is what you do at home, and this doesn't work. You're not going to cut people off. Let's go ahead and try. We're going to learn a new way in here, and that is you're going to listen to one another thoroughly." And they can ask clarifying questions, and I'll tell them that up front. You can ask questions to clarify, but don't cut off. And in fact, even some of the issues that we mentioned in resolving conflict might become some of my rules. Where you listen with your goals in mind, you speak with your goals in mind, and because you're trying to resolve the conflict. And then I let them talk. And again, and one of my issues might even be up front, own your stuff.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Does that help?
That's very helpful. I have one. I'm going into mediation right now with a friend who might be on a podcast, and I'm just kidding. This is,
you and Brett.
Yeah, no, we're good. We're good. I do want to point out how you never used him though as the example when it came to resolving conflict and things like that. So apparently, I have another bar I got to hit, and it's the Brenton level. So, oh no, he's just shrugging. Yeah, probably. Yeah. Listeners can't see that.
I know from the last time you were on, you recommended a couple of books, and I'm about 3/4 of the way through Safe People, and I've learned more about myself as I read it, and and have work to do again.
Yeah, good. Well, I
Yeah.
know that I was just rereading chapters 2, 3, and 4 in Save People last week. Actually, we taught on part of that at church. It was part of my message, because as we have been reconciled with Christ, the Bible says we have the ministry of reconciliation.
That's right. Yeah.
And so I was thinking, okay, what are my hurdles in my own life
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
reconciling with somebody?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's some of the practical stuff. But chapters 2 and 3 in Save People really look at some of those hurdles. I can distill those down to about 7, 8, or 9 of them. And then I like chapter 4 in there, Brenton, which really helps us learn how we developed some of those, I'm going to call them bad habits, of
Mm-hmm.
defensiveness, etc.
Yeah.
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 Well, it just goes back to kind of what you talked about, just bringing up as even Brenton, you just mentioned, just raising your own self-awareness so that you're able to make those adjustments, to identify the false beliefs and the things that we've been talking about over the last couple of conversations. It's just, man, you want to talk about growing as a leader, that's where it is. And that's great.
Mm-hmm.
That's good stuff.
I would say to, any of you who are youth leaders in your church or pastors and you're having trouble, reach out and seek some help. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, my schedule, like I'm booking April and May right now, and I'm full all the way up through that time. But my email is rbooth777 at AOL.com. And, if you have a need to talk, I, uh, give myself over as a big brother to any of you that have need to work something through. But Chad and Brenton would be my first call to. In other words, well, you know what? I look for safe people, for other people to talk with. And you guys are confidential. You're non-judgmental. You don't get lost in the minutia of people's problems. And you're really about helping them get where they need to get. And it's me too. I understand my own life struggles. I was not raised in a Christian home, had a lot of baggage when I got saved. And I thought the Lord took care of it, most of it in the first couple weeks, but apparently it's been a lifelong endeavor. And anyway, we invite other people to join us on the journey.
Well, that is high praise. Thank you so much, Robby. And man, what an incredible just resource you are to the kingdom, really more than anything. And I'm so grateful for you. So thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Brenton.
Well, hey, Robby, we have taken up more of your time, and I think as we were even having a conversation before, we're going to try and get you on more routinely, maybe in the next season and everything. And so thank you for taking the time to be here with us today for an extended interview, cut, whatever you want to call it, conversation. It's just been so great.
Thank you. It's my privilege. I love you guys and think of the youth leaders and pastors that and other staff members, children's leaders that listen to this, and just know all three of us are here to bring you guys strength.
All right. So you can probably hit the stop on the record. Just so we make sure we get it all uploaded.